Once I'm clipped in, they're going to check me, and then I'm going to walk to the edge, and then they're going to sit me down, and then they're going to leave me, and then I'm just going to breathe for a second, and then the camera's going to come around, and then I'm going to have to stand up, and then I'm going to jump off. And just breaking it down like that.
Yeah.
She was just a young girl with a dream that didn't seem too loud, didn't seem too impossible, but somehow it led her into a world much louder and more dangerous than she ever expected. Florence Pugh didn't grow up thinking she'd one day walk the red carpet with flashing lights in her eyes and strangers calling out her name like they knew her. No, her story started in a quiet English town, far away from Hollywood and its noise. She wasn't born into fame or handed a silver spoon. What she had was raw talent, a fearless heart, and a love for performing that felt like her own secret power. Even in school, people noticed that when Florence acted, something happened in the room. Everything slowed down, and all eyes were on her, not because she tried to be seen, but because she had that rare kind of presence that couldn't be taught. It didn't take long before casting agents noticed too, and soon she landed her first major role in The Falling at just 17. She wasn't trying to be famous, she was just doing what she loved, but her performance was so intense, so deeply emotional, that people couldn't stop talking about her. That role opened the door, and Florence stepped in. Then came Lady Macbeth, and suddenly everything changed. That film didn't just show her acting, it exposed something else, something darker, something powerful that made Hollywood sit up and take notice. The girl from Oxford had arrived, and she didn't come quietly. Directors wanted her, critics praised her, awards started whispering her name. But what no one knew was that with every new film, every spotlight moment, Florence was also starting to feel the weight of the world watching her. She smiled for cameras and gave charming interviews, but inside, she was already starting to understand what fame really meant. It wasn't just about acting anymore, it was about image, control, and being judged for things that had nothing to do with her talent. Still, she pushed on. Then came Midsommar, a terrifying, brilliant film that showed her emotional range in ways that stunned even her biggest fans. The way she screamed, cried, and broke apart on screen, it didn't look like acting. It looked real. It felt real. And maybe that's because some part of her was breaking too. Florence had become a household name. She joined the Marvel universe, she was nominated for an Oscar, she was everywhere. But something about her success didn't feel normal. It felt too fast, too heavy, too public. Every photo she posted online was picked apart. Every outfit she wore became a headline. Every smile or frown was analyzed. Suddenly, Florence Pugh wasn't a person anymore. She was a symbol, a rising star, a media darling. And slowly that spotlight started to feel more like a trap than a dream. Behind the scenes, she was struggling to find space to breathe. She missed privacy, missed the calm, missed the version of herself that didn't have to be perfect all the time. People praised her confidence, her honesty, her strength, but few noticed the moments she looked tired, the days she said less, the times she pulled back. Her kept rising, but something in her eyes was beginning to change. And while fans celebrated her success, the quiet truth was that Florence Pugh was already starting to disappear. Not from the screen, but from herself. The world loved the star, but they didn't really know the person. And that's where the mystery begins. Why would someone so talented, so beloved, begin to step away from the thing they worked so hard to build? Why would Florence Pugh, who fought so hard to make it to the top, suddenly start pulling back just as she reached it? The answers aren't simple. They're hidden in small moments, quiet signs, and decisions that seem invisible unless you are really watching. And as we go deeper into her story, the truth becomes harder to ignore. This wasn't just about fame. Something else was happening. Something Florence never said out loud, but something you can feel if you look close enough. Because behind every smile, behind every perfect photo, there was a girl who once just wanted to act. A girl who never asked for all this. And now, that girl might be trying to find her way back, or maybe trying to escape for good. Florence Pugh was not like the other rising stars in Hollywood because from the very beginning, she decided to walk her own path. And that path was not smooth, not easy, and definitely not the one most people expected her to take. She was young, talented, and beautiful. And the industry wanted to shape her into what they thought she should be. Another perfect image, another soft-spoken girl who would smile on cue and wear what they told her to wear. But Florence had something different inside her, something stubborn and honest that refused to follow every rule. When people in power tried to tell her how to dress, how to talk, how to behave, she didn't quietly obey. She questioned everything. She wasn't rude, she wasn't angry, but she was strong. And that strength started to bother some people. When she wore a sheer dress without a bra on the red carpet, the internet exploded with opinions, and some of them were cruel. People judged her body, her choices, her attitude. But Florence didn't apologize. She posted a calm message saying she was proud of her body, proud of her freedom, and not ashamed of anything. That moment shocked many people, not because of the dress, but because of her refusal to be silent. Hollywood wasn't used to that. They liked their stars polite and quiet. But Florence was brave, and she stood up for herself in a way that was rare in an industry full of fake smiles. She spoke out against body shaming, against bullying, and against the strange pressure to be perfect. Even in interviews, she said things most young actresses were too afraid to say. She talked about the pressure to be thin, to be quiet, to be grateful for any role, no matter how unfair. She said no to parts that didn't feel right, no to people who tried to control her image, no to ideas that made her feel small. She didn't care if it cost her jobs. She cared about her truth. But with every no, she made new enemies. Some directors didn't like her honesty. Some magazines stopped calling. Some powerful people in the background began to whisper that Florence was difficult, that she was too opinionated. And slowly, behind the flashing lights, something dark was starting to build. The industry that once celebrated her began to shift its mood. The same people who once praised her now started leaving her out of big events, major covers, important roles. At first, it didn't seem obvious. She was still working, still smiling, still acting, but the pattern was there if you looked closely. Florence, who once seemed to be everywhere, was now showing up less and less. She stopped doing long interviews, she avoided certain events, she looked more guarded, more tired, more quiet. Something was changing, and the people closest to her knew it. They could feel the pressure building behind her smile, could see the sadness in her eyes that didn't match her cheerful words. It was like the fire she once had was still burning, but behind a wall. Florence never said it out loud, but many started to believe she was getting tired of the game, tired of pretending, tired of fighting battles that never seemed to end. She had become a symbol of rebellion, of truth, of standing up for yourself, but carrying that weight every day was slowly draining her. And as more scandals started to surround her projects, as more gossip started to fill the air around her name, the mystery deepened. Why was Florence pulling back? Was it fear? Was it exhaustion? Or had someone behind the scenes decided that she was no longer useful to the machine that once lifted her up? Fans kept supporting her, but even they began to wonder, why was their fearless star growing so quiet? Why did she start avoiding the spotlight she once owned? And most of all, what really happened behind those closed doors, where decisions are made and careers are destroyed with a single word? The truth was hidden, locked in private meetings, whispered in studios, passed in emails we'll never read. But Florence's silence said everything. And the more she stood up for herself, the more that silence seemed to grow. Not because she was wrong, but because sometimes the cost of truth in Hollywood is much higher than people imagine. Florence Pugh, the girl who refused to be shaped, was now being slowly erased by the very system she had tried to resist. Or maybe she was planning her next move in silence, on her own terms, far away from the cameras, the noise, and the lies. Everything seemed to be going perfectly for Florence Pugh, at least from the outside. She was becoming one of the most talked about stars in Hollywood. Her face was everywhere, on magazine covers, in interviews, on red carpets. And yet, something strange started to happen, something that didn't make sense for someone at the height of her fame. People started noticing the tension in her public appearances, the awkwardness in some interviews, the way her smile seemed a little forced, a little different from before. It all began during the press tour for one of her most anticipated movies, Don't Worry Darling, a film that was supposed to push her career even higher. But instead of celebrating the movie, most of the attention turned to behind-the-scenes drama. And Florence was right in the middle of it. Rumors exploded online. Stories came out about tension between her and the director, Olivia Wilde. There were whispers that Florence didn't approve of how the film was handled, that she felt uncomfortable on set, that something wasn't right. People pointed out how she skipped press events, how she refused to say much during interviews, how she seemed distant and cold toward her co-stars. Some even claimed she was treated unfairly, while others said she was the one being difficult. No one really knew the truth, but the silence around it made it all more suspicious. What could have happened behind the scenes that made her pull back so suddenly? Why was a star who used to be open and warm now so closed off? The red carpet at the Venice Film Festival added more fuel to the mystery. Florence showed up looking flawless, confident and calm, but she avoided eye contact with certain people, barely spoke during group photos, and walked away quickly after doing just enough to be polite. Fans and journalists watched every move, trying to figure out what was going on, and the internet was full of theories. Was she upset? Was she protecting herself? Was something darker happening that no one wanted to say out loud? The answers were hidden, but the signs were clear. Florence was no longer enjoying the spotlight the way she used to. Every photo became a clue. Every skipped event felt like a message. Every quiet moment turned into a new headline. Even her social media, once full of honest posts and joyful moments, became colder, more distant, like a wall was being built between her and the public. She stopped explaining herself, stopped answering the gossip, stopped trying to fix what people were saying. And in Hollywood, that silence is louder than any words. Some said she was protecting her peace. Others said she was being punished by the industry. And a few even wondered if the pressure had finally become too much. But one thing was sure. Florence was changing, and not just as an actress, but as a person. She started choosing different projects, staying away from big Hollywood events, focusing more on her own space. And while the media kept trying to pull her back into the drama, she kept stepping further away. Fans noticed her eyes looked tired in recent photos, her body language more guarded, her presence more careful. This wasn't just about a movie or a misunderstanding. It was about something deeper, something emotional, something personal. Was she hurt? Was she fed up? Was she scared? Or was she just trying to escape before it got worse? The mystery only grew as more insiders started sharing quiet stories. Florence turning down interviews, refusing to attend major award shows, asking for more privacy on set or avoiding co-stars altogether. People who once praised her now whispered about her behind closed doors. And still, Florence said nothing. She never explained, never defended herself, never fought back in public. That silence made people uncomfortable because they wanted answers. They wanted a scandal. They wanted drama. But Florence refused to give them any of it. Instead, she stepped back further and further until people began to wonder, was she disappearing on purpose? Was this a plan to protect herself, or had something happened that made her afraid to speak? And as the gossip grew louder, her silence only became more powerful, more mysterious, more haunting. In a place where everyone talks too much, Florence said nothing, and sometimes that silence speaks the loudest. Something changed and people started to feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. Florence Pugh, the actress who once lit up every room she walked into, was no longer showing up the same way. She was missing from interviews, she skipped major events, she didn't post much on social media anymore, and when she did, her words felt distant, careful, like they had been filtered through layers of silence. Fans who used to see her everywhere now asked the same question over and over. Where is Florence Pugh? Why is she stepping away from the spotlight just when her career is supposed to be at its highest? This wasn't the normal kind of break celebrities take. This felt different. This felt like a quiet exit, slowly, silently, like she was trying not to be noticed. But people did notice. Everyone noticed. She had just starred in some of the biggest films in recent years. Her name was being discussed for more roles, more awards, more fame. And yet, she was moving in the opposite direction. One by one, her public appearances began to fade. Big red carpet events happened without her. She no longer joined late-night talk shows. She turned down magazine interviews. projects that were supposed to include her name suddenly didn't. And even though no official statement was made, the message felt clear. Florence was pulling away. But why? What happened behind the scenes that made one of the brightest young stars in the world want to disappear? Some people said it was burnout, others thought it was personal heartbreak. Some insiders even whispered about conflicts with producers, scripts being rewritten without her approval, or uncomfortable power games that pushed her to her limits. There were rumors she was being punished for not playing along with Hollywood's rules. Others believed she had simply seen too much too quickly and was tired of pretending everything was fine. The truth? No one really knew, but the signs were everywhere. Florence was not the same. Her energy, her openness, her joy, all of it seemed dimmed. In some rare paparazzi photos, she looked like someone trying to avoid being seen. Not someone trying to hide badly, but someone who had learned how to blend into the background. Like she had been trained by pain to become invisible. Her friends stayed quiet, her team gave no answers, and she gave no interviews. That silence made people curious, but it also made them worry. Was she okay? Was something wrong? Was this her choice? Or was someone else making the choice for her? Sometimes in Hollywood, the truth gets buried under smiles and contracts. Sometimes a star disappears not because they want to, but because someone behind closed doors decides it's better if they go quiet. And sometimes the only way to stay safe is to walk away before it's too late. Maybe Florence knew that. Maybe she had seen too many others crash under the weight of fame, and she didn't want to become another broken name in a long list of forgotten stars. Maybe this was her way of taking back control. Or maybe she was pushed so far that she had no choice. The timing of it all just didn't feel right. Just as people were expecting her to announce her next big move, she vanished. Just as the media wanted more headlines from her, she gave them silence. Just as fans reached out, she pulled away. That's not what stars usually do. Not unless they're protecting something, or hiding something, or running from something. Maybe she was hurt, maybe she was angry, maybe she was scared, or maybe she was all three. What we know is that Florence didn't go out with a big goodbye. She didn't cry on camera or post a long letter. She simply stepped back like a shadow moving out of the light. And now people are left asking the same thing. Where did she go? What is she avoiding, and what happened to make her choose the silence over the spotlight? The answers are hidden in all the things she doesn't say, in all the places she no longer goes, in all the roles she quietly turns down. And maybe someday the truth will come out, but for now, Florence Pugh remains a mystery, a bright star who chose to dim her own light and left behind a silence that says more than words ever could. Fame looks beautiful from far away, with all the flashing lights, red carpets, smiling fans, and golden awards. But when you step closer, when you live inside it, the truth can be very different. And for Florence Pugh, the truth became too heavy to carry. At first, it all felt like a dream. She was chosen, loved, praised, and placed on the world's biggest stages. But slowly, quietly, that dream started to turn into something darker, something harder to escape. She was no longer just an actress. She became a brand, an image, a product that people wanted to control. Every word she said, every dress she wore, every step she took in public was judged by strangers who thought they knew her. They loved her confidence, her boldness, her bravery, but they also criticized her for the same things. And over time, that love began to feel sharp, almost like a trap that smiled at her while tightening around her neck. She had entered a world that asked for everything: her time, her voice, her energy, her beauty, but gave back very little peace. The pressure grew louder with every role, every headline, every rumor. And while Florence kept smiling on the outside, inside, something was breaking. She had always been honest, always been herself, but even the strongest voices can start to shake when the world refuses to listen or show kindness. People demanded her presence, her opinions, her explanations. But what they didn't ask was how she was really doing, what she was feeling, or what this life was doing to her. And maybe that's why she started to disappear. Not all at once, not with a big goodbye, but slowly, like someone backing out of a room filled with too much noise. Florence never said she was done with Hollywood, never told the world to stop looking at her. But through her silence, her distance, and her quiet choices, she showed that something had changed. Maybe she was tired of being a puppet for other people's expectations. Maybe she missed her freedom, the version of herself that existed before the spotlight turned her into someone everyone thought they owned. Maybe she just wanted to breathe again, without cameras or scripts or interviews filled with fake smiles. Whatever the reason, the signs were clear. Florence Pugh was not running toward the spotlight anymore. She was walking away from it. And now people are starting to realize that behind all the glamour, fame can have a very high price. The girl who once gave her heart to the screen now seemed to be guarding it more tightly, protecting something precious that fame nearly stole. Some say she will return stronger on her own terms. Others think she may never come back the same way. But whatever the future holds, one thing is certain. Florence Pugh reminded the world that even stars have limits, that even strong women get tired, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose peace over praise. Her silence is not weakness, it is her way of surviving. And in a world that demands constant attention, her quiet disappearance has become the loudest mystery of all.